just comes and checks on me every now and then.
We're going live.
Cool.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are. Welcome back to Solutions with Aquarius Rising Australia. With the awesome Gabby and Rachel. I'm so happy to have you two beautiful ladies back. We are talking again about, we're continuing our conversations about healing after SRA, which I think is so valid. And you probably can hear my internet is horrendous today. We have load shedding, which for those of you who still don't know what that is, our electricity gets cut off for anything between 2 and 4 hours at a time. So you might lose me midway, but you'll have Gabby and Rachel that'll carry you through. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, beautiful ladies. Thank you so much, Gabs and Rachel. Welcome back. And I'm really so looking forward to what the conversation is going to be about today.
Thanks for having us and giving us this opportunity to share. I think it's so beautiful at the moment that, you know, so many people being called to heal personally and heal the community at large as well. And, you know, all of these stories coming forward are just, it's just incredible. It's like for every survivor sharing their story, there's more and more healing. So it's a beautiful time.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I'm just, so many people coming forward and just, it's like the ones with the greatest story are coming forward now, like the biggest stories are coming out now. So that's pretty amazing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it shows how much, I guess, our collective consciousness is healed in terms of just being able to listen to survivors. You know, there's not so much ridicule, there's not so much people being shut down. Like there's actually places where people want to hear these stories, and that's so healing for the survivors coming forward. But for all of us, you know, there's so many people that, you know, I have these amazing conversations with people that are telling me, you know, their trauma that they've been through and they've never spoken to anyone about it before. And I feel this change in the energy, and the fact that we're all ready to listen is inspiring that. And that's beautiful. You know, some of these people are 60, 70 years old and they're finally getting it off their chest. Like, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing. The more people that speak out, the more people, because you'll have memories. You always have some memories going through, or most people, when they've been really horrifically abused. But it's not until you start to hear other people talking about it that you might get, well, sadly triggered. But it's also, it opens doors in the mind, so you can actually allow that stuff to come through, and that can be incredibly cathartic. And also, you know, nobody wants to feel like they're the only one who's gone through those experiences and they're the only one who's expressing it. So yeah, I've been amazed at how many people are just getting the strength to speak out. I suppose, you know, when you have crisis situations, and we've been in a crisis situation for a couple of years, 2.5 years or so. Yeah, I think a lot of people realize that, you know, if you don't speak out now, when you're going to have the chance, you've got to kind of face everything and just put it out there. Yeah, so
I so agree. And you know, we had Fiona Barnett on a few days ago, and as everyone here is completely aware, that she's obviously one of the original whistleblowers. I know from myself, she was the first person's story that I heard. And I can't even remember how long ago that was. Definitely more than a decade, I'm sure. But I remember being so mortified and so horrified, because that was the first time I was enlightened to child hunting parties, is in an article I read about her story. I was mortified, absolutely mortified. But, and, you know, having her on the other day as well, and, you know, noticing her frustration at the fact that there are so many people who really haven't, I want to say, woken up. And I think that is so true, because even when you're looking at what's happening with this, there are so many people that are aware what it's doing, but yet they're still going for it and not aware of the long-term, deeper consequences of that. So I think it's really, you know, for me, what true healing is about is understanding the journey, understanding the spirit, understanding how important the emotions are, and to deal with the emotions around that, which then opens up the mind to think. When the IQ and the EQ are then aligned, then it's like the husband and the wife within, or the yin and the yang, the male and the female within our bodies, then start communicating differently. And we start having a different relationship with ourselves. We start having a different communication with ourselves. We start understanding ourselves more deeply. And then our physical experience on this planet becomes a much more pleasant one, you know, where we don't have to put our faith in these guys putting all this horrible stuff in this zip zab zabbity doo, you know, and we can then start understanding what true freedom really is on this planet. So I'm really excited for that as well, I have to say, to experience the true freedom of what it is to be a human being and not have to succumb to someone else's agenda and the control that have been put in place on our, this is our earth, this is our body, this is my body, it's my earth. I'm allowed to go to places. Yeah, I see my internet is unstable again, so I don't know. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Oh, okay, no.
Got you. Yeah.
It's my body. It's my earth. Who gives anyone the right to tell me I cannot say no to what you want to prick in me? Who gives you the right to tell me I can't travel to places where I would like to go and see certain things that I would like to see? You know, and I think for me, the freedom begins within. When we spark and ignite that connection with the divine, with God, with the source, whatever we choose to call it. I've been accused of being New Age. Honestly, anyone who thinks I'm New Age really doesn't understand the concept of New Age.
And talking about satanic ritual abuse and being New Age, I'm just like, come on, guys.
It's like, I mean, and because I do yoga, I'm New Age. I mean, yoga is older than Jesus. Exactly. Yoga is older than, you know, I mean, the yogic principles have been going on since forever, but I'm New Age, you know. Anyway, you know, frequencies have existed long before Jesus came along, you know, or Christianity was there, you know. Energy exists. Everything is energy. You know, I talk energy, I talk frequencies, I talk aligning with your body, appreciating the body. And if that's New Age, well, then that's all good. But people, I think, need to understand the concept of what New Age is. So anyway, I'm just really excited that we can get together and have these conversations. So without further ado, again, I've been jabbering on here for a while. I'm going to hand over to you, ladies, because I know, Rachel, you've got some very cool stuff that you've been creating over the years as well.
Yeah. So my understanding of the different aspects of healing for people who've gone through MK or ritual abuse, to me, it's fourfold. There's the physical, there's the spiritual, and there's the psychological and emotional. And of course, they're all intertwined because your body will have somatic responses to your emotional experiences. And then that fourth element, because I was sort of trying to, as we were getting this series together, I was thinking, you know, what do I want to present? And one of the things that really affected me, and has been something I've had to build for years, was when I got out of the cult, I didn't know who I was or what my personality was. I struggled to understand what I actually liked, what my preferences were. So even though on a deep down level, I knew that I was kind and I didn't want to hurt people and I didn't like conflict or stress, I didn't know just really basic things like what was my preference in music. what shows did I like to watch? It sounds so strange, but it gets stripped from you. So, and then I had to sort of build on that. And so, you know, at first you get these people around the place. I mean, it doesn't mean they're all MK survivors or SRA survivors, but they're like a chameleon. And when they get into a relationship, they become the person that they're with. When they get a best friend, they become that best friend. They don't have a background, or they don't understand what their real interests are. And that's what happened to me. So when I got out of the situation I was in, I was about 16, found a partner, and pretty much took on a lot of his personality traits. Luckily, he was a very intelligent man, he was very well read. So I read a lot of books, and I basically liked his taste in music, and he must have thought I was a complete nutcase. But we managed to keep that going for quite some time.
Can I ask you, if you don't mind, just on the offset there, when you got out of the cult, did you tell people you were in the SRA, that you'd been MK Ultra, that you'd had these horrendous experiences occur? So you kept that to yourself. How long did it take for you to actually share that with someone? Because I hear exactly what you're saying, and it just gives me complete goosebumps, because I can so identify with that. What you're saying is that I didn't know who I was, so I had to learn human behaviors and tastes and understandings from someone who I was close to. I'm just interested to know, how long did it take for you to share that? And what was the response as well from people, and not just friends, but maybe boyfriends and girlfriends too? What was their response for you having experienced what you did?
So I always had some memories, but not all. So some of those, because I'd repressed, or I hate to use the word repressed because of, you know, repressed memory syndrome, which is a load of rubbish, but I had suppressed a lot of the memories because I just couldn't deal with them. They're too hard to cope with. But there was some, like this particular family member who had pashed me this one time as a teenager. I had told family members about that. Again, nothing was done. There was a time when, I foolishly kissed my father goodnight at 14 with my towel around me because I just had a shower, and he took that as a come on. You know, I told people about that. But at that time, I didn't remember what ensued, apart from me closing my bedroom door and locking it and putting the cupboard up against it to get away from him. So there were things that I did remember, and I did tell people. My memories of the really horrific stuff started at around the age of 30, and it sort of pretty much progressed from there. So a lot of it was suppressed, not repressed, suppressed. Just so I could cope.
So at this stage, when you had your first boyfriend and stuff, you didn't actually know, you didn't have those memories surface yet about your really, past experience. Okay, makes sense.
I didn't really share the ones that I did remember at that point with him either. But it's interesting, I hung out with a lot of very alternative people at that time who also had been through very difficult childhoods, and we were like the people on the fringe, you know, punk rock scene. So, you know, it was I felt comfortable with those people. They were my people because they were also a bit lost. Not all of them, but quite a few of them were quite lost. And so it felt like my people. Yeah. And so around 30, the memories came out. And luckily I was in a safe place, and probably because I was in a good relationship at that time, I was able to remember. So you know, it's interesting because I think I pretty much modeled myself in high school on my friends, because I still didn't really know what my interests were, but I would model on them. And then when I found the boyfriend after high school, I left all my friends behind because that was a memory of all of my childhood that I needed to get away from. And then I went off and hung out in that scene. So, you know, and I see this recurring, you know, more and more as I speak to other survivors. I see the same pattern, that they're you do end up sort of being wiped. It's like it's not just the memories that are wiped and the hypnosis to get rid of them and all the drugging to get rid of the memories. That takes away a lot of your conscious interests, what you are. It's incredible, really. You just end up that what they want is a blank slate, and that's what you end up with. The psychic driving,
isn't it?
Yeah.
I was just going to say that really is, you know, by them breaking down your personality, your identity, you know, that's a way that they're able to control you and avoid you either leaving or speaking out as well. So it makes so much sense that your identity is being so suppressed by all this behavior.
And that's another aspect of, you know, it's really, really difficult. If you don't know who you are, it's extremely difficult to relate to other people and to have healthy relationships. So you can see why a lot of people who come out of those sorts of systems and cult families go into substance abuse, or they'll end up on really heavy antipsychotics or antidepressants, because that either they do remember and it's horrific and they can't cope with it, or they don't remember and they don't know why they don't have those memories, or why they don't know why they had this constant, you know, inbuilt gnawing anxiety.
Mm-hmm. It's like something's missing and they just can't put their finger on it. No.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Right up until 30, and then started to remember, which, I mean, I'm glad I went through the process, because I wouldn't be who I am now, you know, having remembered it all. But, you know, there's times when you think, oh my God, when are the memories going to stop? And I don't know if they ever really will. I've got friends in their 80s that are still remembering stuff that happened to them as children, and they're only just able to cope with it. And it's really interesting, you know, this last 2.5 years where we're supposed to be learning how to be good little slaves and sit back and go into lockstep and behave ourselves, has actually just triggered a lot of people to remember things that they may never have been woken up to.
Hasn't it just?
Isn't that wonderful? I love that. I love that, because it's had the adverse effect that I think these Lucy's have wanted us to have, right?
I like that, Lucy.
Lucy, yeah.
They've underestimated us. They've totally underestimated our capacity to bounce back.
Absolutely. And it's really sent them into mayhem, hasn't it? It's like really sent them into mayhem.
Yeah, it's interesting what's going on at the moment. And there's lots of different people with different opinions, and it's very hard to know which is the right one. But if you go with your gut, I always believe there's reason to hope. So I'm very hopeful.
There's always a flip side, isn't there? And it's been really beautiful seeing over the last couple of years so many people that are rising up, and, you know, so many are women. Like, the women are definitely hearing the call, and there's some beautiful men as well, that I would say are very in touch with the divine feminine too, because it's in both of us. But yeah, just the survivors, like, and not just sexual abuse and satanic ritual abuse survivors, but survivors of all sorts of trauma. Like, I have friends that, you know, have experienced domestic violence, and they're out there, just speaking out. And I think, like you said, it's this pressure, you know, we know it, we've gotten through it before, and it's just like, bring it on. Like, we're not afraid, whereas other people, I think, are like, whoa, this is too much, and shutting down. Whereas, you know, I think the people that have survived and overcome, you know, these horrific things in the past are actually ready and able to lead the way for others at the moment. So it's kind of like all of that trauma was a gift in the end.
Beautiful way to put it, Gabby. You know, you don't know what's worse, being triggered to remember terrible things because, you know, you've been through that by this process that we're going through, or having had an idyllic life and being so shocked. You know, you can see why people want to go back to normal, but there is no normal. What was their normal was our horror. So just because it was hidden didn't mean it didn't exist. And I certainly don't, I don't want everybody to have to go through the same thing, or to have to be aware of it. But I think we're at a point where in humanity where if the majority of people don't wake up to what has been going on in the background, they're going to keep watching the mainstream media and thinking, you know, that what's happening at the moment is this collection of group consciousness to try and direct the group consciousness in one particular direction. And so everybody's thinking, well, this head of state has to be assassinated and that head of state has to be assassinated. And it's like, what if they are actually the ones that are going to help? So far out, you know, I don't know how often we have to tell people, don't listen to the mainstream media. They do not tell you the truth.
Yeah.
It's infuriating.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think we were talking to Tom Althouse last night, and he was saying exactly what you are saying now, is that every time mainstream media puts these plastic boys and punts them, you got to know that is the biggest BS story out there. So, you know, but in having said that as well, you know, there's also, these guys have infiltrated the back channels as well. Let's not forget that. They've definitely infiltrated, and they've also created a lot of mayhem and a lot of chaos in the truther community. And I'm sorry, I am so far away from even believing any of that bullshit anymore, you know. And when they're putting this one up there and Trump is going to come save the world, Trump is not going to save anyone's ass. No, he will not. Trump doesn't even know who I am. Trump doesn't care who I am. Trump doesn't care about, and it's nothing bad against Trump. It's just he's a human being like everyone else. And if he is in the American president, he's been in the system. Maybe he's not a Satanist. Maybe he doesn't eat kids. I've never heard any reports that he does. Let's hope that he's on the other side of that. But what I'm saying is that each and every person needs to be in their truth, align themselves with their higher consciousness, Christ, the divine, God, the source, whatever people choose to call it, and pray, meditate, and you will know what it is that is true for you. We will find each other. And I think what we really need to be doing right now is finding our tribes like we are finding each other, getting together, communing with each other, and in so doing, awakening our communities, our countries, people. We can't force anyone to wake up. You know, we can put the coffee down and go, honey, time to get up. And they'll press that snooze button. Honey, time to get up. Snooze button. Honey, time to get up.
Like rocking
Snooze button.
Wake up! I think we're at the bucket of cold water stage at the moment.
Yes. Some ice.
Sorry, I often tell the story. My son was little. You know, I used to wake him up for school in the morning, and I used to take him coffee and a rusk in the nicest way. I'd go, sweetie, it's time to wake up now. He'd hold the most horrendous abuse at me. You know, and all I was doing was just like, you know, lovingly, gently, kindly way, because I know for me, I mean, my dad we were at boarding school, but I remember on a Monday morning, we had to go back to school, and my father used to take us back in the morning, and he used to gently walk in there, and every morning he woke us up, he put a cup of coffee and a rusk down next to our bed, and we had bedside lamps on, and he'd switch the lamp on, he'd said, time to wake up, my darling, we've got to go to school. And I'd go, But, you know, for me, I hate being woken up. That was a really nice way to wake me up. So I did the same thing to my child, except I got the adverse effect. And if you're just looking at the way the world is now, you know, it's like, come on, guys, your coffee's getting cold out there. No more snooze button. But yeah, I think yeah, exactly. So yeah, but I think it's that's why I say I just think it's wonderful that we are finding each other. We are going to be the ones that save ourselves. People need to connect with their spirituality, whatever that is for you. Everyone has their own way of worshiping and believing, or whatever it is. You will know what is true. You will find your people, you'll find your tribe, and you'll find your community. And in so doing, we will build stronger and stronger communities. And then these Lucies have absolutely no grip on us at all. And we need to realize that, you know, no one is saving us. We are our own savior.
I love that. And this is, you know, there's just this feeling, and it's out there in the people that are awake, and they're really looking to be saved. Like, there's still so many people that want a figure to come along and make it all better. And it's like going back to the wake up thing, mummy's not coming. Like, you are here to be sovereign. You are here to create solutions. Like, this is, everything is infiltrated. Like, we literally have to throw the table over and just build it back from the community one step at a time. Like, the top's just, it's rotted, completely rotted. Like, I can't even believe people in Australia are considering voting. Like, do you think we live in a democracy? Like, come on, guys. Like, we need to start just making the solutions ourselves.
Absolutely. And with Aboriginals, like we had Bruce Shillingsworth on a couple of weeks ago, and speaking about law as in LORE as opposed to LAW law. It is really going back to the law of the land. And, you know, we have it here in South Africa too with the Khoisan people, except now, I mean, it's so weird because every African tribe from every African country is claiming South Africa as their land. And it's not, you know, there's also that nonsense that's going on. So we've got a whole different set of challenges, not just the apartheid that we've got to heal from, because there's horrible history around that for sure. But also, you know, there's just this whole grab from every single tribe out there at the moment. And it's about understanding there's enough for everyone. We are here for a purpose and a reason. We just need to take a breath, calm down, pray, meditate, align, and then see what the next step forward is, and do so in a unified way. Notice it's going to be, you know, we've got to rebuild our communities. There's hard work. There's intelligence that we need to use, you know, but we've got to make it happen, because no one is going to do it for us. And I think the sooner we realize that, the better. Every one of us, the sooner we realize that, the better. Yeah. And that's why I think, Rachel, you know, with what you're saying now, and I'm sorry, and I know I chimed in earlier on when you were just getting into what your story is in terms of being a chameleon. I think there are so many people out there who are chameleons and who don't know who they are. So please, I'm just going to ask you again now, without me interfering a million times, to speak about how that was for you, so that you can give some valid advice and concrete advice there for us.
Yeah, well, the hardest part of that process wasn't just trying to find myself. It was not knowing why I was lost in the first place. So there was always this constant feeling of, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel like this? Why am I so depressed? Why am I so anxious? Why are the simplest questions, when I'm like, social situations were so difficult. I mean, again, I was in that punk rock scene, so a lot of my socializing was in that scene, and that was safe because you're in a dark nightclub, there's lots of really loud music, you can't talk to people. I'd just chain smoke, because that was my way of coping with a social enclave. Parties were more difficult, but I would just follow my boyfriend around. So, you know, to not understand why I felt such chronic insecurity at that time was the hardest part. And now I think I fully, again, I don't have all my memories, but I fully understand who I am, what my motivations are, what I like and dislike. All of those things are there now. That's taken, I'm 48 now, that's taken since 16, so many years to get to that point. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, if I was to go out, you know, into a social situation now, it'd be pretty clear to me, you know, just from observing, knowing where I was and all the things that I was doing, the people around me, I probably could pick quite easily who's been abused and who hasn't been abused, but just by watching their physical presentation and whether or not, you know, that this is the other thing with substance abuse. It's there to cover up that pain and that inability to interact on a normal, healthy level. And that's one very important aspect that I wanted to talk about with the healing today. Healthy relationships. It's so difficult for somebody who's gone through mind control, the programming, the ritual abuse, to be able to trust and to have a healthy, normal relationship. And again, you know, a lot of those people, like myself, would go to, well, agoraphobia. That's another big thing, where you just stay home all the time. You don't go out and socialize, so you end up very isolated. You know, many people end up on the substance abuse, and that's again to cover up, also to make it manageable to be out and sort of being involved with people. And you know, you do see a lot of people who've gone through those sorts of experiences gravitating together because there's an understanding, but that can also have its own problems. It's like putting two alcoholics together or two drug addicts together. You're going to end up feeding each other's illness, which doesn't help.
What would you say, knowing, and Gabby, I'm going to ask you as well, because I know you've had your fair share of trauma, maybe not in the SRA, as far as I know, but you've also had your trauma, you've also been through abuse and stuff, you've also had your masks, if you want to call it that, that you've had to cope with. How do we, someone like myself, for example, although every person has their stuff that they deal with and every person has their traumas, you know, people may come from heavily alcoholic homes or disconnected parents or parents that have abandoned them, maybe not, you know, as I said, not necessarily SRA, but each person in life has their set of traumas to deal with. So what I'm interested in, Rachel, from you as well, and Gabby, what were your masks and how did you deal with that? And then Rachel, so it's a twofold question. How would we recognize someone that has been SRA'd, and how would we, as the average normal person on the street, deal with someone like that? How, in a compassionate way? How do we not run away? How do we understand that when someone, we unknowingly triggering someone and we're getting a response and we're going, well, screw you, Jack, you know, I mean, I didn't even mean what you think I said, you know, but having no knowledge whatsoever. So I think just to make everyone more aware that this is something that has been pretty damn common. As you say, just because it was hidden didn't mean it didn't exist. And a lot of these stories are coming up now. A lot of these people, just from the comment section in what we're saying, you know, we're saying people are having memories, they're being triggered, things that others are saying is bringing up memories in them. So a lot of people are starting to have memories surface now. And I think it's just, as we go along in the next few years, is going to be more and more on the increase. So I'd be interested to know from both of you.
I think for me, like my biggest thing with masking my trauma was just, it very much is the same, like being a chameleon. Like I thought, give a F what people thought of me, but really like I was a real people pleaser, like, and I look, it had its benefits too, like because I used that in my leadership when I was running multiple businesses in terms of keeping everyone happy and building teams and building communities, etc. But I would sacrifice myself to make sure everyone else was happy. And I think that gave me a bit of a mask in terms of, you know, it was all about them. I didn't have to think about this turmoil that was actually building up inside of me. Yeah, so I think the whole just kind of, yeah, just being what other people need you to be rather than actually focusing on yourself and building yourself, building your identity, especially, you know, after having childhood trauma. And often that childhood trauma is not just the abuse, it's the, I guess it's the ongoing relationship abuse with the people that are around you. So it's not just with the abuser, but you might have had enablers in the family. You might have had people in the family that refuse to acknowledge your pain, people in the family that call you a liar, whatever else. Do you know what I mean? So there's a whole lot of traumas that stem from the original abuse trauma. And I think it's very easy to, you know, put on this. For me, it was like, I'd read all the books. I knew what the dangers were. I knew I shouldn't sit in shame. I knew that I was likely to get addicted to something. So, you know, I was really careful with those kind of things. But I just really ran myself into the ground trying to, I guess, prove to myself that I was okay, until I couldn't do it anymore and had to deal with all the emotions. And the silliest thing about it is, you know, that hit me when I was in my mid-30s, so about 6 years ago. And when all the emotions come up, it was just like, I don't know why I ran from them for so long, really. It was quite silly, because it was actually me trying to come back to myself. I just needed to shut up, sit down and listen to my body, listen to my mind, listen to my soul, listen to my dreams. And like, so much of me was dying to come back to me. But it had kind of been chased away by the abuse, the original abuse. And then all the times, I guess, I hadn't been heard or hadn't had an opportunity to heal with family members, etc., over a period of time too. So kind of a big part of healing that I found really helpful was I come across the shamanic healing practices, and they recognize trauma as a time when, you know, your soul basically is split, which, you know, really ties in with the SRA and DID and post-traumatic stress, etc., that a lot of survivors live with. And they believe that because your soul at that time is just experiencing so much pain, part of it runs away. And so a lot of the shamanic journeying is about you going on this journey, you finding that part of your soul, you sitting with it, meditating with it, and it often comes back to you in a vision, and just really reintegrating that. So I think they've got a lot of really beautiful practices that we can learn a lot from, with recovering from this trauma as well, just to listen, you know, to stop. That was what I needed to do. And unfortunately, I physically had to fizzle myself out before I was prepared to do that. So, you know, but we can all, I use those practices all the time, you know, especially over the last few weeks. I've had a memory come back from a really early time of abuse, and it's kind of really tested me to take the time to sit with it, to listen, to spend time in nature, etc. And it does get easier. Like, you kind of like, okay, I've done this before, like I know what to do. As yucky as some of the emotions are that come up, you know, like you've got that path that, you know, if you follow it, will take you where you need to go. And, you know, the biggest thing I want to say to people is, you know, you're always healing anyway. It's just your choice whether you want to do it on your own, locked up in this little room that you've created for yourself, or you reach out a hand and ask someone for help, like whether it's a friend or a healer. Like for me, the shamanic person that I ran into was just changed my life, like, and it really got me started on coming back into myself with so many things. So just, yeah, it's so much easier to walk the path of healing with other people, and they probably won't have every single answer that you need, but I believe that we attract the right people at the right time to give you at least the next few steps. And then from there, you'll head somewhere else as well.
Yeah,
I think what I'm hearing as well is that we're not obviously aware necessarily that things have occurred. So we can gauge through our behavioral patterns. Let's say if we're on this highway to hell type thing, where we're just going hell-bent for leather down a road, not considering anyone else's needs, or maybe too considerate, being totally empathetic and attracting narcissists into our lives, for example, because I've absolutely, you know, the law of attraction is something that is so, so real. You know, what we surround ourselves with is really a reflection of what is going on within us as well. So if there's something that we just can't make head or tail of, we don't understand our behavior in that way, it's an automatic response, it's kind of like, you know, it's our default button, that would be a good, maybe a good point at which to say, hang on, let me just sit down here and let me contact a healer or someone who could maybe assist me and help me understand my behavior here, because these behavioral patterns are very seldom, okay, I'm behaving this way because of that. I'm having this reaction because of that. It's only once we start realizing, sitting down, being still, and allowing, therefore, the memories to start surfacing when we are still, because the memories will only surface when the mind is quiet, right? So not when we deliberately, unconsciously create this chaotic mind, so that suppresses those painful memories that the mind thinks we can't deal with. So we therefore create this chaotic lifestyle very often. Or as you, Gabby, you were saying, first became this absolute people pleaser, and then driving yourself hell-bent for leather into being this overachiever. So there was no balance there, really. So the whole objective is, if there's no balance in your life, it would be a good time to sit back and ask yourself, what am I hiding? Or what am I not dealing with, right? Am I right?
As society, like, you know, we've taught that keeping busy is such a sign of success. And I bought into that because I think it helps me just, you know, quieten down. I never had to ask myself any questions about deep down what was going on inside me, because I was so busy making sure I was successful and doing so much and helping everyone. You know, and a lot of people that have splits or post-traumatic stress actually are really high achievers, because they can literally push themselves past the point of normal endurance. And I would say that in my career, in my social life, in my sporting life, with my horses, like, I look back and I don't even know how I did that. Like, I'm just like, oh my God, it's nuts. But I just didn't need to sleep. I didn't need to eat. I didn't need to, it was just like, get it done. So, yeah. And that to me, like, I know a lot of survivors that were really high achievers in their business, in their careers, in their sport, etc. And it's quite common to have the burnout and then the emotions and the healing to start. So I think definitely look at people that do seem very successful on paper, etc., but are perhaps workaholics, control freak. I was a real control freak in that mode as well, because everything had to be under control. So it was obviously those
narcissistic traits.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying before,
Sure.
Gabby, about deflecting. So, you know, I don't do well in therapy situations because I would rather be the therapist. So I deflect. So, you know, if someone's trying to, so this is why I treat interviews like therapy, because it's the only time I really would open up. I would far prefer to be in the other chair. And it's interesting, Chantel, you asked me before about, or both of us before, about what are some of the signs. I'm probably going to get shot down for saying this, but a lot of child sexual abuse victims, not necessarily the really, you know, the other end of the scale where you're saying, you know, murdered children and things like with the satanic ritual abuse stuff, but a lot of child sexual abuse victims will put on a lot of weight because it's protection, and it's a form of androgyny in a way, and it's also to stop them from, because in their mind they think that they're unattractive in that stage. They think that other people won't sort of confront them or show those sorts of attractions, and they don't get confronted by it. And yeah, I may get shut down for this one as well, but this is very personal to me. So anybody else who has facial piercings can be a sign. So I'm not saying everybody with facial piercings has some sort of horrible abuse in the background, but that's saying it's as plain as the nose on your face. There is a reason why people augment their faces, and there can be many, many different reasons, for beauty and for lots of different reasons. But for me, I had a lip ring. So and it was a like a circular one around the lip. And I met this incredible psychic who took one look at me. I spent a couple of hours talking to her. First time I met her, I'm pretty sure it was the first time I met her, she just looked at me and just said, why have you got a lock on your lip? And full download memories came flooding in, and I remembered.
That just gave me chills. I've got goosebumps.
Yeah, me too.
Me too. What she picked up on was my father, after he had abused me, would do a little sing-song voice, which he used to use when he was doing the ritualized nursery rhymes as well after abuse. And he would say, so you lock your lips with the key, and then you swallow it. And so I was locking my lip. I put literally a little hole in my lip and put a lock on it. It wasn't I had a stud for years, and then I went to the lock. And the stud in itself would have been, another symbol of that. So literally, I think I took it out that day, because from that point on, it had a completely different energy for me. And it's really interesting. When I first saw my father after I'd had it done, he laughed at me, really, really nasty. And he would normally not do that in front of other people. And I had another sibling with me when he did it. And she was like, obviously it was triggering her. She was like, because we were adults, what are you doing? What are you doing? Laughing at me. Yeah, very interesting. And it's interesting also, in that session, I took some photographs of him. He was very, very ill at that time. He had a wasting disease. He couldn't swallow. And I had just recently told him, what are you not saying? I've been working as a psychic for a little while. And what are you not saying? What are you not spitting out? What can't you swallow? Oh, we didn't like that. Oh no, you'll get sued if you do that work, and all these terrible things were going to happen to me because I was doing the psychic work that he trained me to do in childhood and used me for, that I hadn't quite remembered at that point. But yeah, I took photos of him that day, and there was this weird spiral formation in one of the photographs that I still can't work out what it was. And I actually, because it's made of light, this spiral in the photograph, and these are the old, not digital, the old cameras. Yeah. I think it might have been an angelic being that was trying to get in between us, or to warn me to get away from him. Yeah. But it was on the same session he had a good laugh at me, because he knew why I put the lip ring in, because he'd been telling me that for most of my childhood. And it's funny too, because at one point when he was doing that little gesture, I said to him, but how can I open my mouth and swallow the key when I've just locked it? And the look on his face, because he realized then that I'd just undone, this is while I was still a child, I'd just undone many of the different things. He'd done it really badly. He was quite clumsy. So then it was, you put it in the drawer and you lock it with the key. Then you swallow the key. Oh, yeah. So, yeah. So, inherently somewhere in doubt, deep down inside of me, that was a sign, it needed to come outward. So so that's one sign, people who are terribly overweight are hiding within themselves. People who, not all, but some people who put things on their faces, it's an outward sign, I'm in pain, there's something wrong. People who chain smoke, people who have workaholic tendencies, alcoholics, drug addicts, prostitutes, the prostitution factor, 90% are sexually abused as children. The same percentage in the porn industry, the abusing Absolutely. Of children is the training for those sorts of industries that make people an enormous amount of money. There's lots of signs.
There is.
Absolutely.
I was going to add to that as well, Rachel, just reminded me when you were saying it, a lot of people that have experienced some sort of abuse in their childhood will end up with displaying an eating disorder as well. So it could be anorexia or bulimia. And that was something that I definitely suffered with that as a teen and for a good few years. And I found a lot of survivors that I met during my 20s when I was kind of just processing everything that had happened, definitely had experienced that or was still experiencing it. Can last for a really long time as well. And I think it's just that, really low body image and almost like trying to control something in their life because the abuse was so out of control. So that's a real cry out for help, as well as the really underweight and the really overweight as well. Yeah.
It's also self-hatred, especially with the anorexia. So not being able to nurture oneself, because I also had it for many, many years.
Yeah, wow.
Wow, yeah. How would you suggest that when memories start surfacing in someone, like you say, your memories started surfacing around the age of 30. And I know that's from what we've also learned, that's when the MK Ultra programs generally start breaking down. So then often they would then haul people back into the system and reprogram them. I know that's what happens with a lot of the celebrities. They get hauled right back in again. How would you suggest people, if they start having memory surface and weird things, maybe you can explain from your side what memories started surfacing for you, how did it make you feel, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah. So one of the first ones that came up was being medically experimented on at a particular location that had a lot of memories that came up sort of. And again, you know, one memory will come up and then there'll be a cascade of memories related to that location or that age or that perpetrator. So once one door is unlocked, a lot of memories will then come through that doorway. And that memory was being medical students practicing catheterizing me. So that through the urethra, which, you know, caused a lot of damage. And it was really interesting because the room had an orange hue, and it wasn't just the decor, there was an orangeness to it. Now, apparently, so I explained this to another survivor and they explained, well, that's actually quite a common thing. There can sometimes be these weird correlations with colours that come up. And I've spoken to other survivors since that there are, with the trauma experiences, there'll be programming with colours to do with those trauma experiences. So I know a survivor who has issues with the colours blue and red, that they are triggers for her, which is the poor darling. I've got a trigger with orange. I often get orange and green confused for no apparent reason, not that I'm colorblind, but if I'll be talking about a color, orange, I'll say green. It's quite bizarre. And I don't usually make mistakes like that. So there's a lot of programming around those things. So people who have memories that come up and then they have a color with it, that's not unusual. So that might help some people who are struggling with that. That led on to other memories about that particular location. Some people are lucky and they get their memories chronologically. That certainly wasn't the experience for me. I had mine in order of horror. So that first memory was one of the least abusive situations. The really horrific stuff came much later. So I would have a memory of fighting with my father before he raped me. But then there'd be a certain point where I couldn't see any further. And then later on, the rest of the memory would come. So I'd only be able to cope with a certain amount, there'd be a stop to it. And then later on the rest of and of course you know deep down that you haven't seen it all. And I think there's also aspects where you will say to yourself, I don't want to look at any more of that. And that's when, Gabby, like you said, get very busy. You find things to distract yourself. You constantly, I had a time where I couldn't have silence. So I always had the background music on or television, usually television, because voices, I felt like I had company. So the voices would keep me, and it must have, different to music, the voices would engage a certain part of my brain that wouldn't allow the memories to come up. And that's really oppressive too for the people that live with you. If you need to have something in the background constantly playing, that can be quite irritating for other people. So that was something that I had as a coping mechanism. But yeah, it's quite interesting, the cascade that happens once one memory unlocks the rest. Yeah, and again, you know, you'll get, my first memories were when I was quite small. There were things that happened, and again, it would have been so much easier if it was chronological. And I do know someone who had perfect chronological memory. You know, it was just, well, you know, they unlocked it. their 2-year-old memories came up, and then their 3 and their 4, and, you know, good luck to you. That's wonderful, but it didn't work that way for me. So that's another part that's also very, very confusing, is when you have these memories, it's really an important aspect of validating them is working out. So in that memory, that piece of furniture was over there. It feels like it's about midday. And so you piece what clothes you're wearing, you'll piece together all those bits and pieces. And then you can go through, say, photo albums and see, did I have that piece of clothing at that time? Do I remember seeing that in a photograph? You might be lucky enough to find a photograph of the room that you're in, if it's your own home where you were being abused. So you can place, was that piece of furniture there? You know, when you're talking about really young memories, when you're very small, that helps you to piece the picture together as well for validation, and talking to other people as well can really help, so that you can make sense of it all. It's such a process. It just never ends.
Yeah. And writing, I would imagine writing it down, right? You know, as the memory starts surfacing, writing down. I have found, and anyone who's done my programs and stuff will know, writing is a definite, it's something you simply just have to do. Journaling, you know, stuff like that. So I would imagine that writing, when these memories start surfacing, writing them down would be a good way, because I love scribing, and I call it scribing. You know, when people start typing, it's not the same. It's taking a pen to paper and actually writing, forming the letters, because writing channels wisdom. It ignites knowledge. It gets the stuff that's in the mind and it gives it an outlet. It's like, yeah, an outlet for that. So I think for me, I would recommend to someone they start writing, and I would imagine there must be chunks of pain so hard that sometimes come out that you literally want to choke on it. Yeah. I can't imagine what it must have been like to have your first memory of your father raping you. For me, that must have been probably one of the hardest things to digest. Can you tell us about that? How was that for you? How did you deal with that memory of, it might have been a relief because it might have given you that understanding of this challenging relationship you might have been experiencing with him, and suddenly that would have been, oh my gosh, that's what it is. But such a horrifying thing. I can't imagine, because if I just think of myself with my dad, to imagine that he would ever have done that or even come close to doing that would be the most heartbreaking thing that would probably shove me over the edge of any cliff. So how did you deal with that memory? And especially even maybe knowing that your mom may have been complicit or not, or just ignorant to it, asleep to it, or participated in the abuse, whether she was programmed or not. You as a child wouldn't have understood that. You might understand it now. But as a child, these must be very hectic memories, even as an adult, very hectic memories for them to surface and to process. And the reason you would have suppressed them is because your mind simply couldn't cope with the reality of it. Yeah. So how would you suggest, how was that for you? And how would you suggest people cope with those memories?
Yeah, I mean, trying to so that's the thing, trying to remember which one came up first, because they do come in cascades. I think the first time I actually remembered, so I mean, obviously with a female body, there's more than one area that can be abused. The first memory of the not usual female part of the body that gets abused was very young, and there was a knife involved. So that was truly horrific. And I've talked about that with Dee McLachlan, who you've had on, and that's on, you know, that's out there as an interview, which is very important, because these if you open up a child in that area with a knife, I'm talking about the back end, the Freemasons believe that you need to do this particular ritual before the age of 3. So I don't want to go into it too much detail, but he not only cut me, he then raped me afterwards. So, and that also is because they believe that opens up psychic abilities, quite sick, but it's part of their ritual is to cut in that area. And also that area of the body on the inside does not scar. So that there was that one, and there was another time where it was the more usual place that a girl would be abused. And he put my legs between us so that it wouldn't be too much penetration, and he was explaining it as he was doing it, because he wanted me to be able to have children later. So, I mean, and this is a thing, you know, that might be helpful to people. When you've been abused as a very young child, it can really damage the cervix, and you can actually end up with what's the cervix pushed backwards. So I have what's described. It's been pushed backwards. So even though he was trying not to damage me, so I could still have children, there was still some damage there, and that comes out when, you know, if you don't have memory of that sort of thing, when you have a pap smear. You know, the doctor might explain, well, I can't see it, I can't get to it. You have to wriggle around because they can't get the speculum in the right position to actually be able to get access to it, because things down there aren't quite right, push backwards. And that was particularly, so both those times that I remember, possibly the first times that I remember, I was 5 with the vaginal rape. But something had happened before that was so much worse than the actual rape. So he'd taken me to see something on his property that was, I had to crawl through the outlet. So there are sinkholes all around the Stansbury property where my father had land, and caves and things, because it's right on the ocean. And he took me into a space where he had collected up human remains, just bones, skulls. So he had shown me that, and the skulls were very small. So I knew inherently, even as a 5-year-old, that what I was seeing were children's skulls, and there was a multitude of them. I don't remember if I had the ability to count at 5. I must have had some ability to count. Maybe I was too traumatized to count them all, but it made a small fence. And again, Dee McLachlan, we did an interview about that in 2019, I think. And she did a sketch, or she got someone to do a sketch of what I had remembered. And it was just like this small wall of skulls. So that was more horrific for me than the rape. But this is what they do. They'll show you something like that, a satanic ritual abuser, and then they will do something to you physically that you don't want to remember, to mask it and to hide it and to squash it down. So
traumatic.
Extremely. So there's more things to look out for. You know, if you've got a cervix that is so damaged that you struggle to keep a pregnancy going, it's a possibility that there might have been some damage there from childhood. When we're talking about the numbers, I go on the percentages of someone that I have great respect for, Frida Briggs, who sadly died. And her percentages was 1 in 2 girls and 1 in 3 boys in Australia are sexually abused. So the numbers are horrific. And, you know, people talk about much lower numbers now. Maybe there's less children being abused. I really doubt that with the care system the way it is. But yeah, it is just phenomenal. So, you know, there'd be a lot of girls getting around, or women getting around with damage in that area that they're not aware of. Yeah, and other signs, you know, there's so many other signs that's happening. Gardnerella in a child is a very unusual thing. It's a vaginal infection that usually is extremely rare, unless that child's being abused. Thrush can be a sign, but not necessarily. Urinary tract infections can be a sign in little children. Yeah, there's so many signs.
It's just scary thinking about those, isn't it?
For me, how did you deal with that when those memories surfaced? did you contact someone? Did you speak with someone?
Mostly I wrote it down. I would talk to family members who were awake to help me to work out, you know, which aspects they might remember themselves. Had they seen anything similar? Had they heard him talk about those sorts of things? And that helped to validate. With that particular sinkhole, as I said, there's multiple sinkholes in that area. One sibling pointed out, he actually called me a genius. He said, "Oh my God, I just realized, you know, that tunnel that he made, because he made me walk through this little crawl through this little tunnel, which was where the water from the sinkhole went out to the ocean. And it was actually under the sand. He had to dig down in the sand to find the hole in the cliff face that we could walk through." And I'm extremely claustrophobic. As you can imagine, all these tiny tight spaces that I've been forced to go through. And he shimmied through in his wetsuit. So he didn't cut, because that sandstone, that even though there was the concretions, or whatever you call it, calcretions of the water going through the sandstone all over probably, I don't know how many hundreds of years or so, had a kind of it softened it a little bit, but not much. It was a very rough surface. And I had to crawl through on my hands and knees. I had a skirt on. I didn't have any protection on my hands and knees. I came out with blood on me. He was fine, but he forced me to go through because he wanted to show me. And he was very proud of this little collection that he had. And as I've said before, 106 boys went missing from the Glandore Boys Home, just a couple of streets from where I grew up. And those skulls came from somewhere. So
just like trophies or something, can't they? Like, how sick.
Yeah, he's a very sick man. He kept many trophies. Yeah. And again, when he died, there were fires burning in 1 o'clock in the morning. And the people that were witness to it, including journalists, were saying it smelled like burning flesh and hair. So I don't know what other trophies he had that were being burnt the night that he died, but I suspect it was human.
So have you been able to forgive him?
Good question. On a soul level, kind of. On a human level, never. But I also realized that, there are certain souls that have a really horrible, that they're our teachers. The worst souls here are our teachers. We learn a great deal from trauma, but it doesn't justify it in any way, shape or form.
I agree.
Some things are just unforgivable. As much as we would like to say forgive everyone, etc., there's some things in this world that are unforgivable. I never thought I'd say that, but yeah.
Well, all I say is thank God that you've been able to transcend this. And I can't even begin to imagine what you must have experienced in that situation. But I'm extremely grateful that you are here and that you are sharing your story, and especially on the Solutions channel, where you can be a guiding light for so many other men and women who have come through and experienced, and many who have not come through yet, but are there hovering to break through that surface, and that there are amazing soul spiritual teachers like yourself out there who've really gone through and experienced the worst kinds of hell, but yet you still hold the light, and you are still a beautiful, loving, compassionate human being, and can be there for others coming through it. So thank you for that, really. Thank you.
And thank you for what you do, because it's here I'm deflecting again. But thank you for what you do.
No, and it's fine. Deflect, reflect, do whatever you need to. I'm just happy you're here. That's all. So thank you. Thank you, Rachel. And I so look forward to having you guys, you girls, lovely ladies, on again in 2 weeks' time. And just taking us through the process of what it is. So in the meantime, just to, I think this is just for people like the average lay person on the street to understand that there's been so much trauma in so many people that we are unaware of. If I look at the two of you, never in a million years, if I walked past you in the street or sat next to you in the movies or wherever, imagine that you've been through what you've been through. And for us to be aware and to observe behavioral patterns in others that we can be more compassionate about, for people who are still having memories surface and not understanding their own behaviors at this point in time, possibly, to see that certain things could be warning signs or little red flags, to sit down, talk to someone, get in touch with someone like yourselves, and who can maybe start opening up a conversation. Ladies like yourself would then ask the leading questions, take people to that point where they can start bringing out their trauma. And only when we face that which is holding us back can we truly heal and move forward. So thank you so much to both of you. And before we end off today, I'd just like to find out, Gabby, Rachel, is there any just final word you'd like to say for today? I know it's been a tough one. I know. Sorry.
Well, with everything we're facing at the moment, always have hope, because that collective consciousness of hope and believing that there will be a brighter day and a light at the end of the tunnel is what will get us out of this mess. It doesn't mean blindly thinking, oh, someone's going to come and save us. No, you've got to save yourself. And you've got to do what your inner gut tells you is your responsibility at this time, not responsibility, or what drives you. So, what Gabby was saying before, getting involved with your community, do whatever it is you can that you are capable of to make a difference, because that's what you're here for. That's why you've incarnated at this time to go through this process right now, is so that you can be part of that collective consciousness, thinking about that outcome that we all want to create. And it's alchemy, as you've spoken about. It is pure alchemy. If you project into the future negativity, you will create it. Project a beautiful future.
That's beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that, Rachel. Hope is such an important thing. And I think, whether you're wherever you're at in your healing journey, just having that, it's not like being super positive and like holding down feelings, but it's just understanding that every day is going to get better, like it is a journey, and to have that surrender to it as well. I think everyone's so caught up in the like, how am I going to save the world? Who am I going to follow that's saving the world? What's going to happen? To me, it really is a time for us to turn within and do our work, like learn ourselves, know yourself so well that you know all of your strengths. And once you know all of your strengths, which usually come from your biggest traumas, you won't have a doubt of what you're meant to do in the world. Like, it'll be so damn clear exactly what you're meant to be doing. Like, I know that's been my journey over the last couple of years. And like you were saying, Rachel, with the communities and helping each other, like sometimes in your healing journey, the biggest gift you can give is to help someone else. And like, I can't tell you how much it has healed me in places that I didn't even know I was still hurting, helping give a voice to people over the last few years. And I get so much back, if not more back, I think, than I ever give, when I'm speaking to survivors and speaking to people that have been through these incredibly horrific traumas. It just reminds me of how truly resilient, how truly powerful we really are once we shake all of this rubbish from the loosies off. So it's exciting times. Like, I think we're just smashing through that darkness at the moment and transmuting it all. And it's beautiful to see so many people having the courage and the bravery to look at how sick things have really become, because that's the only way we can transmute it. And once that awareness is there, it's not going to matter what's at the top anymore. It just won't be tolerated. It's just more eyes opening. And I think, we're carrying a lot of that at the moment, everyone that is awake, and it does get heavy. But I think we've just got to sometimes take a breath and realize how far we've come. And it's happening exponentially now. The wheels are in motion.
Absolutely. And hope, the hope is there. I love that. If we have hope, we have anything. Ladies, thank you so much. I so appreciate you being here, and I definitely look forward to 2 weeks' time again. We are heading forward to myself. Yeah. Look forward to that. Thank you. God bless you both. And to our viewers out there, thank you so much for watching. And if you haven't already, please give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. At this point, you'll find us on Facebook. We're back on our main channel, I think from tomorrow or Friday or something like that as well. But this is a Solutions channel show. So please share this information and this knowledge, because it's so important that it just gets out there for everyone to realize what's been going on. And this is the true healing, the speaking up, the connecting, the finding our voice in a very dark place. So God bless you all. Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you very soon again. Take good care. Thank you. Wow, just hang on. There we go. Are we back? No. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got you.
Yeah, I can hear you. Still saying alive.
Yeah, I think you're still on.
It's probably that. Let me just take it away.